Welcome back, Canadian Baseball Network fans. We're just hours away from first pitch of the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays baseball season, Jackson.
It's been a long winter, Matt. Long winter for just in general, but also for Blue Jays fans. It wasn't exactly the happiest ending to the season in the fall and wasn't exactly the most thrilling offseason. So I think a lot of fans are just looking forward to getting back to the baseball and hopefully feeling good about this Jays team.
Yeah, it seems like forever ago they lost that wild card series to the Twins. Some off seasons seem quick. This one seemed to drag. And even getting to first pitch seems like it's crawling along. But we're here to talk about this year's Blue Jays team, what to look forward to, some questions and some concerns. Let's get to it.
A big conversation this offseason was the stability of the rotation, right? And how last season that was really the biggest strength of the team was the staff, but especially the rotation throughout the season. We saw obviously Bassett had a kind of rocky start to his tenure with the Jays, but he really kind of got going as the weather warmed up. He warmed up too. Kikuchi, what a bounce back from him last year. Right. Gosman continued to be an ace, right? An ace level production. And Barrios also with a really strong bounce back. So, and we talked with Keegan a bunch about this, about how you can't expect that rotation to be as healthy as it was last year. But at the same time, like it's a pretty good foundation to build on, right? And then you bring in Bowden Francis, who John Schneider announced will begin the season in the rotation. That's a pretty good five, wouldn't you say so, Matt?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the health. I mean, you're seeing it right now with Kevin Gosman, where he's at. But saying that, the depth definitely is better. I mean,
Mhm.
Bowden Francis has stepped up this spring. I don't buy a lot into spring training numbers. I think it's for the most part doesn't tell much of a story overall in the big picture. But you look at the rotation depth, you got Gosman, Barrios, Bassett, Kikuchi, Francis, Manoah. That's still a big question mark. And Uriel Rodriguez, what's he going to give you? Is he going to start in the bullpen? Is he going to start he's not probably not going to start in the rotation. But does he work his way into the rotation at some point? There's a lot of questions, but there are answers this year outside of the top five, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. They're deeper. You've got Ricky Tiedemann, seems closer to the bigs. A couple other guys in AAA that can give you a spot start, if you need. And I think that in years past that was a bit of an issue, right? Where the starting pitching depth was a little questionable, even with Alek Manoah down there. I presume he wouldn't probably be their first call if Barrios takes a ball off the shin, but he's an option as well at some point, although he's a bit of a different conversation.
Well, I think, depth is obviously important. They're going to need more than
Mhm.
five guys or six
Yeah.
guys, whatever they went through last year. But at the end of the day, they need Gosman, Barrios, and Bassett to anchor the rotation. I mean, you look at the Yankees and the panic around Garrett Cole. You take Garrett Cole of that rotation,
Mm.
it's suddenly not even close to as good, right? It's the same thing with the Jays. Gosman goes down, Barrios goes down. It's a huge hole. And you're not going to fill that hole with that depth, but it's nice to have, like you said, those spot starts, maybe a couple of weeks to get somebody through an IL stint. But at the end of the day, your best players have to be your best players to win in this league. I think that's been proven. And the Jays have, a top end rotation. I would say at least top 10 rotation, probably potentially top five. I
Mm.
mean, you
Yeah.
could have that argument. So, yeah, it comes down to health, absolutely, but it comes down to health for everybody.
I would take this rotation over a lot of teams. Like Seattle's really good, there's a couple other teams that you're like, wow, they're really impressive. Even the Yankees, if Cole is healthy and if Rodon kind of bounces back there, that's a really good rotation too. But you got to look at this rotation still with a ton of optimism, I think, entering this year. Yes, you expect some regression, you expect maybe not as much health, but you still got to feel, if you're a Jays fan, like they're in a really good place. And Gosman's injury doesn't seem to be too serious. He looks like he'll miss an IL stint, and he'll probably just start. Maybe he might skip one start in the rotation, and then you know as April goes on, make his first appearance, that sort of thing. But it doesn't look to be a massive injury, the way that maybe the bullpen has felt some rather bigger injuries, an impact this spring. As we kind of transition to that, you got to feel good about the rotation. And last season, you felt pretty good about the bullpen too, if you're a Jays fan. The staff in general was really solid last year as a whole. It was a huge bright spot of the team, in addition to their defense, right? Between their defense and their pitching, they did a really good job last year. Now, if only they could get a couple hits. We'll get to that shortly. But You look
I,
at the bullpen, and without Romano and without Swanson to start the year, Matt, it does look a little thin, but uh, they do have a lot of options back there.
I think they can hold it down if it's, a week or two. But I mean, you're losing your setup man essentially and your closer.
Yes.
If that's any sort of extended period, you hear all the time, you've heard all spring how they have to get off to a good start. They're focusing on getting off to a good start. You can't win the division in April, but you can take yourself right out of it
Mhm.
in the first month or two of the season. But it sounds like it's potential for Romano and Swanson to not be out too long. It looks like Chad Green might get some of those innings, in the ninth inning. You watch, that's the thing about Chad Green. He missed a lot last year, but if you go back and watch him in his Yankee days, he was a top end reliever. I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on him a little bit. And he's going to play a big role along with Tim Mayza to fill those spots of Swanson and Romano.
He's going to have to early on. Jimmy Garcia as well in the mix there. I think you kind of look at those three. That's kind of the back end of your bullpen, and depending on maybe how Nate Pearson looks, Hennessy's Cabrera. There's a couple guys here who you're thinking, okay, but Cabrera last year was, it felt kind of like lightning in a bottle when they got him. But we'll see. It's they do have some options there, right? Nate Pearson now is going to get some opportunity, won't he? If he's healthy, and this is a big year for him. In that bullpen, like what is he, right? It's about time to start figuring it out with him, and early on, he's going to have some innings maybe to prove that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think when you lose your two top end relievers, you start to look more towards the bottom and what's filling in the back end of the back end, not the back end of the game, but the kind of back end of the bullpen as
Mhm.
far as the sixth or seventh
Yeah.
guys on the depth chart. You're looking at guys like Mitch White, Nate Pearson, potentially Ricky Tiedemann,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of certainty there.
No.
I know Mitch White's looked a lot better. They're happy with the velocity, but does that translate into the regular season? Again, I don't take much from spring training stats. I don't particularly care to look at them. Nate Pearson, like you said, is he going to be able to figure it out and be a staple in the bullpen? Maybe. You're asking him to be probably the fifth or sixth, maybe seventh guy in that bullpen. Can he be serviceable in that role? I would like to think so. But who knows? It's that this is I wouldn't push the panic button yet until you know what's going on with Romano and Swanson a little bit longer term. If it's only a week or two, it's not a big deal. But if this drags into May and middle of May, this is gonna be a problem for this team.
And you wonder if maybe it does put Yariel Rodriguez into the spotlight a little more, just out of the situation. Maybe they don't want him to be in the big leagues, but he was a reliever in Japan. And if they need a guy to step in, you're talking about six, seven options. He would be a guy, right? Yes, you're looking at the long term, but you got to be picking up wins, especially early on this season. It's too bad for the Jays that they're getting these injuries in spring training. You never want injuries, of course, but they have a tough start to their schedule. They got the Rays, they got Houston, they got the Yankees early on. These are games you got to win, right? And these are good teams. With the wild card setup now, with these tiebreakers, these games against Tampa and against the Yankees are big, big games, regardless of when during the season.
And that's why I think it really could be an issue if these guys are out, even for a month, because like you said, they got Tampa Bay, Houston, New York, Seattle.
Mm,
Then they get Colorado. Then they get New York again, San Diego, Kansas City's much improved, and the Dodgers and Kansas City again. That kind of wraps up their March and April. That's not easy. Like you got to get out of there. A few games above 500. You're probably feeling good out of
mhm.
April, but you can't afford to fall behind, especially in a division with Baltimore, New York, Tampa Bay, Boston. I think they're not going to factor into the division talk, but that's not an easy, a division rival. That's never easy going into Fenway a couple of times a year. So it's going to be interesting. I think Rodriguez, if it were me, he looked good against Baltimore there in his last outing. I think you're in win now mode. I mean, if
Mhm.
you were kind of building for the next few years, maybe you back off, send him to AAA, stretch him out to be a starter if that's what the plan is. But you got to win. You got to take your best. You got to put your best team on the field. It's like a lot of people are saying with Baltimore and Jackson Holiday. If he's your best shortstop, if he's your best second baseman option, put your best team on the field. You're trying to win now, and I think that's where this Jays team's at. They can't afford to mess around and give away wins with Mitch White on the mound when they could have Yariel Rodriguez.
That's right. And like you said, like you can't win the division in April, but you can certainly lose it. And so, this also puts a lot of importance on Tim Mesa, right? As he's going to be needed in some big innings, and probably some unfavorable matchups late in the game. Eighth, ninth inning, you need an arm you can trust. Schneider's going to lead into Mesa, right? And Chad Green, yes. Um, So that will be that will be a pretty big story, I think, to start the season, right? Is how does the bullpen look and how many games does it cost them, right? Early on this season. I recall, back in 21, all the game, the bullpen was just a mess. And the amount of games it cost them in May and June, they missed the playoffs by what, one game, right? Or two games? These games matter, man, whether you like it or not. So if the bullpen cannot be too leaky, right, and just kind of keep it together. And by the way, that brings us also back to the rotation and making sure that they're also putting up quality starts because it could get really nasty early on, sort of a compounding effect. If the rotation has some struggles early on, now the pen has to eat up those innings. If you're in some close games against good teams, all of a sudden you get into May, June, that bullpen's going to be taxed. So Schneider and the coaching staff have a big challenge ahead of them here in managing not just the bullpen, but the whole staff in general here through these injuries.
Yeah, again, it comes back to, like you said, the rotation, but Kevin Gausman, he's got to be the staple. I kind of look at him as, maybe not the exact same, but kind of like Roy Halladay back in the day. That's your stopper at the top of the
Yeah.
rotation. He's the guy that you look to every fifth day if you're struggling or if you're winning to keep it going or put an end to it. So if he's out maybe a week, that's okay. But what does that look like, through April and May? How does that ramp up look for him is going to be really important as far as how the rest of the rotation and the bullpen shakes out.
And that does also bring us to Ricky Tiedemann, who, if we're talking about, you're talking about Rodriguez in sort of the context of win now versus the future. I think in the Rodriguez case, you're looking to push him early on, maybe more so than Tiedemann, right? Because Tiedemann is the classic prospect, right? He's a hard throwing lefty who you just don't see that often. The pitchers are raving about him. Keegan Matheson's raving about him. Everyone down there loves Ricky, right? You got to be careful with him though too. He didn't get a ton of innings last year, right? He's going to need some time in the minors to kind of build up, and he should be allowed some time to struggle a little bit too, right? There's no guarantees he's going to throw up a 120 ERA in AAA to start the season, right? Or AA, wherever he probably started in Buffalo. That's something to keep an eye on too. Yes, is Tiedemann's development in the minors, but don't rely on him too much too quickly to start, right? We just saw what happened when you push a guy maybe too fast to the bigs in Nate Pearson, right? Not saying that that's exactly what happened, but I would say that in terms of looking at a debut for Tiedemann, he shouldn't be some sort of savior of the rotation if there's injuries. He's a guy who can provide innings and maybe good innings, but uh, the expectations of Tiedemann, I think, do need to be tempered a little bit, especially in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you mentioned Tiedemann and Pearson. If Tiedemann comes up and struggles a little bit, which he might,
Yeah,
he's a young guy, he's
it's the
top
big leagues.
prospect. It's the big leagues. It's the best league in the world. There's going to be Jays fans that sit there and oh my goodness, is this Nate Pearson
No,
2.0?
he's a
Yeah.
bust.
So that's why I think, Rodriguez is just a better fit. He's more of a veteran. He's been around the block a few times. There's talk about Rodriguez's inning limits too. He
Yep.
didn't pitch all last year. If burn too many early, does that cost you later? That sort of thing. And I get that, but I think you need to take each game as it is and pick up wins early, bank as many wins early. Because like you said, with the new wildcard format, I think Boston was in the race.
Yeah.
They were like 5 games back or something to begin September last year.
Yeah.
And that Boston team had no business making the playoffs, but they were in the hunt. So you don't want to be dropping too many early and getting into that sort of a position. But
And as we saw last year, we talked about this last year. The trade deadline is very different now than it was before this new wildcard setup because there's so many more teams in it. And just in general, there's more of an incentive to try and compete into September and not give up. You're not going to be getting the kind of options maybe at the deadline for shopping that you did in the past. I've seen a lot of talk about, well, they could just, we haven't got to third base yet, but they could patch up third base at the deadline if they need to. Well, probably not. Like maybe, but that's a big ask. And so the pitching is similar, right? They have some depth, and you can see why they built up some depth. And I like the idea of bringing in Yariel Rodriguez, who you didn't have to trade anything for, right? You just paid. That's why he and other options like Mitch White are very important because pitching depth is a lot harder to come by than in years prior.
yeah, and I think overall, just looking at the depth chart right now, there's
Yeah.
no reason to be concerned, even with some of these injuries or setbacks early on. It's still one of the better staffs in the big
Yeah.
leagues. It's going to be a strong suit of the team all season long. So, we're sitting here nitpicking it a little bit with injuries and what happens here, what happens there. But at the end of the day, I would still be pretty confident if I'm a Blue Jays fan that this rotation, this bullpen is good enough to get them to where they want to go.
It still seems like, especially the rotation, is the strongest part of the team. That and the defense, right? Those are two of the pillars of this team and what makes them strong. And that if they're at their best, it's because the rotation is humming and they're playing good defense. Baseball season is back underway, which means summer is right around the corner. And the place to be this summer for young baseball players is the Baseball Zone's summer camps. This July and August, the Baseball Zone is offering indoor and outdoor camps. It's a fantastic way for young athletes to improve their skills, make new friends, and of course have plenty of fun. And if you sign up before April 30th, you can get 15% off the 4 and 5 day camps. They're also offering a summer membership this year. That's unlimited summer camp access for $9.99. For more info and to sign up, head to thebaseballzone.ca. The lineup, and this was a huge area of discussion all last year and throughout the offseason. And how do you make this lineup more scary? And what's the approach? And how do you get more power? There's a lot of questions, right? You had a lot of underperformance last year. And it led to a lot of boring games because, the pitching was good. The defense was good. You're losing games 2-1, 3-1. They wouldn't make comebacks. It was boring, frankly. And I get it. I get why a lot of fans thought it was boring. So you enter this year and, they swing and miss on Ohtani. And their biggest addition aside from that in the lineup, you'd say, is Justin Turner, who's in his late 30s and can provide something. But still a lot of questions in this lineup, to say the least, Matt.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, knowing that we were going to record this episode, and my initial thoughts on this lineup is I think they're gonna struggle to score runs because I think 5 through 9 is very unpredictable. I mean, you got guys like Kiner Falefa, Varsho had a down year, Kiermaier had a good year, but can he do it again offensively? He's not known as an offensive player. Who else, I think the top four are set. I think it'll be Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Turner. If I were John Schneider, which I'm not, that's what I would do. And I think that's going to give you production. Vladdy obviously needs a bounce back, but that 5 through 9, it's hard to have confidence after last year in that group, and they didn't add to it. And I think that's obviously been the biggest complaint among Blue Jays fans.
Yeah, you mentioned Kiermaier. It's interesting with expectations, right? Heading into last year, Kirk and Varsho, expectations were pretty high for the both of them, right? We saw them both struggle. Kirk didn't really get off to a good start in spring, and it just felt like he never really got going. Varsho, he had serious swing issues. The guy was popping it up. He was an awful hitter at points throughout the season, just completely unreliable. I think that, yeah, for me, Matt, like, even David Schneider, another guy, can you expect the same kind of freakish production, early on from him? Probably not, right? You'd think that he'll hit lefties pretty well, but he's a big unknown too, right? That would seem like a flash in the pan. So you're looking for spurts from those guys, right? Vogelbach, a couple hot weeks. If Votto ever makes a team, and we'll get to that in a little bit because that's a whole different beast, but you're looking for a couple hot weeks. But with guys like Guerrero Jr. and Springer and Varsho and Bichette, obviously, and even Turner, you're looking for consistent production. You need that, right? Springer's slugging percentage has gone down each year he's been here in Toronto, okay? That's not good, okay? That's scary if you're a Jays fan.
That is not good. That is not good.
And for a guy in Springer who thrives on power, that's part of his game, right? How many times last year were you watching a Jays game and you see him take a swing at a pitch that's a little too high, he gets under it, and he flies out, or he pops up? Before, he would either take that pitch or he'd drive it out of the yard, right? We've seen his power. Now, we saw a real sort of a diminishing of power across the board last year. That could have been an approach thing. That could have been a million different things, right? But the reality is he needs to, is his slugging going to go down again? Because Springer at the top of the order, I mean, he is a question mark. There's a level of consistency that you'll get with him in the leadoff spot, but he's now in a corner. Okay. It makes him less valuable defensively. He's getting older, and I'm sure he's great in the room and all that stuff. I'm sure his intangibles are fantastic, but he's got to hit more than he did last year. He's got to set the table a little more.
Yeah, I think age is definitely a factor. He's 35.
Yeah,
Justin Turner's 39.
yeah,
Kevin Kiermaier's 33. You know, I sit here saying this as I'm about to turn 32. Like these guys are going to the old folks' home, but that's definitely a concern. Playing on the turf, you know, whether you believe in that or not. I don't know if the lineup's any better than it was last year.
mm,
I really don't know if it is. You lost Belt, no Chapman. I know Chapman was terrible from May on, but you know, I don't love platoons on teams that expect to compete. Like I don't know if Schneider and Biggio at second is going to work. Is Kiner Falefa going to work at
they're
at
both.
third?
Yeah.
You know, that's more of a defensive. You know, you can have great pitching and defense. And they say pitching and defense win championships. You got to score some runs. You know, especially five through. I'm telling you, 5 through 9. I'm not confident. I wouldn't be confident, and I don't think you should be confident until they can prove it.
Yeah, pitching and defense didn't win the many championships last year, did it? That's the thing. And I agree with you totally, but within reason. I think that you just in baseball though, like you're trying to get to the dance, right? We saw it with Arizona last year. They what, 83 wins and they knocked off the 100-win Dodgers. Like crazy things can happen. You got to get there. But you look at this lineup and it just doesn't provide a lot of hope. Doesn't provide a lot of like excitement. Jays fans can't point to a guy and be like, "Yeah, we're excited for that." Because the reality is there's a lot more question marks than answers in this lineup, right? I would say the only people you can rely on are Bo Bichette, Turner to a degree if he's healthy, and maybe Kiermaier to provide his floor, basically, right? Which is a little bit of a below average hitter with a little bit of power and speed, right? Aside from that, there's a lot of questions, right? What the hell is Kirk going to bring this year? He's got to be better, especially early on with all the pressure on him.
Jansen's hurt. You know,
Yeah.
he's had injury problems. I know a lot of them have been hit by pitches, but it seems to just keep happening.
Yeah.
You know, it's is that an issue that they're gonna have to deal with all year? What can Jansen provide when he's back? You take too many, shots to the hand, it's gonna affect you as a hitter a little bit. Um, yeah, I just when you say that the two constants in the lineup are Bichette, obviously, and a 39-year-old Justin Turner, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence among people.
No. And I think this lineup is constructed with two things in mind. A bounce back for two players, sorry, in specific. Dalton Varsho and Guerrero Jr., right? And when I say bounce back, I know Vladdy had a fine season. I'm talking that a return to closer 2021 form, which now is looking more like an outlier in his career than the norm. So this is a big year for him that way with Guerrero Jr. This lineup is constructed for him to be a 40 home run, close to 1,000 OPS guy, which is
Yeah,
asking a lot.
with this lineup like this, an okay year from Vladdy, this team's not going anywhere. Like
Absolutely.
that's just the way it is. I mean,
Yeah.
Bichette's going to do what Bichette does. I think Turner will be a run producer there in the 3 or 4 hole wherever they put him. But if Vladdy doesn't produce to an all-star level, they're not. they're not gonna. They're gonna finish exactly where they finished last year. They're losing in the wild card round. They might even miss the playoffs because there's a lot of I just think back to last year. There's so many just soft outs. It
Mhm.
just seemed like you said, it was boring.
Yeah.
You get to the fifth, sixth, then you get into the good teams' bullpens, and it's just like there's no jam to it.
Yeah.
It's a Dalton Varsho's flying out of chasing a high pitch. David Schneider provided some excitement there, but I just look at this line. Isaiah kind of Falefa's, a below average offensive player. Kiermaier, like you said, his floor is probably a slightly below average hitter. Um, it's just there's a lot of just it's not exciting to look at the bottom half of this line, and they could surprise, but I'm just being honest in what I see.
No, you're right. I think that most fans feel that way. And it does sort of bring into context the questions of where's the sense of urgency here? I would say that it was a weird off season, and I think that if it's, for example, I'm just throwing names out there. If it's JD Davis instead of Isaiah Kiner Falefa, maybe that moves the needle a little bit, but does it really? Right? I think
I
that
think
when
it
it
raises the floor. I think,
sure, yeah.
I don't know, a little bit more pop there. I thought I was surprised that they didn't go after him. I was
Yeah.
surprised he landed in Oakland, to be honest with you, but it seemed like a natural fit. They needed kind of a third base type to go along with Kiner Falefa. It's just too much patchwork for me.
Yeah.
Second base, third base, too many platoons, too many guys. Oh, this guy does this well, but when you say a guy's really good defensively, when that's the first thing out of your mouth, it means he can't hit. In my,
That's
like
right.
whenever I hear someone, oh, he's a really good defender, you're saying that because he can't hit.
That's right.
And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean Isaiah Kiner-Falefa isn't a good defender, but he's also not as good as Matt Chapman. He's not
No,
Matt Chapman good.
no.
So I don't know. That's what I think. As soon as I hear good defender, dude can't hit.
And that was the case too, like with Kiermaier as well, right? He's a glove first guy. Varsho, last season at least, was yes, the best defensive outfielder in baseball, but he was also one of the worst hitters in baseball as well. I have kind of a bold prediction, actually. You know, I'm not very optimistic about this lineup either, and I think that it's funny to hear people try to reach for straws with this lineup because it's hard to do. I just was. It's hard to do. But I do have a prediction. I think that Dalton Varsho will bounce back this year, and I think he will be a 6 to 7 WAR player this year. F WAR, that is. Okay, that is my bold prediction. You heard it here first, the hot take, the whole deal, the childish little thing that everyone does. That's my bold position, is that Varsho will be that player that the Jays thought they were getting last year. And here's why. I read a lovely Fangraphs article about his swing adjustments. That's the first thing. Okay. It talked about how he has a very, very unique swing and how he's elite at everything except hitting. You talked about it, right? Like, oh, we say a guy's good at this first because he's not good at hitting. But the reality is, if Varsho, he also has the power. He is contact away from being a 6 to 7 WAR player. He was a 4-win player with just power and defense. That's it. Okay. If the guy can just get on base a little bit and hit 30 to 40 home runs, that's asking a lot, but not from a guy with as much power as he has and continue to play great defense, especially if he's playing a lot in center field. That is the guy who, I mean, I don't know what Shapiro and Atkins and the Jays are projecting for him this year, probably something better than last year, but that would be the thing that could, especially if Vladdy with a bit of a return to form, that would certainly change the look of this lineup, wouldn't it? If your number
It,
5 hitter Varsho against righties is a guy you can really count on to provide you some power.
if Vladdy bounces back and that happens with Varsho, yeah, I would feel a little bit better. The two things I will say is when you say he's contact away, that again doesn't inspire confidence. He's gonna hit his home runs,
Yeah.
for sure. He's got the power. He's gonna play good defense, which is important. I'm not saying defense isn't important,
Oh yeah.
but bat to ball skills, especially in today's game, bat to ball skills are obviously important. And when you say he's contact away, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But I can see a bounce back for sure. He was a good player in Arizona, and he didn't show it last year offensively at least. And if he can get back to that, now you're rolling 5 deep that you're confident in the lineup. Who knows? Maybe Ernie Clement carries some of the spring magic over to the regular season. I don't know. I'm not sold on that either. Kiner-Falefa is going to be Kiner-Falefa. Schneider and Biggio platooning, I guess, can be fine if the lineup gets a little bit deeper. But we'll see. But Varsho, I think, is definitely the key. Varsho and Vladdy are definitely the keys to this lineup for me.
Like I could see them winning another team gold glove, right? They did it last year. I could see them winning it again because they're really good defensively again. But that didn't exactly equal playoff success last year, and that's what people are focused on. A lot of what baseball is about the regular season, obviously, because that's the what we watch. That's the marathon. That's the whole thing. And there is a level of like just enjoying the regular season, right? Enjoying the summer days and the ups and the downs. That's part of what makes a baseball season great, is that it all averages out. But we're at a point with this core and we're at a point with the fan base where none of that matters, right? They don't care if you, I mean, I'm sure they care if you win the division versus being a wild card because you'd get a first round bye, and that matters a lot. But whether you're the first seeded wild card or the third, whether you're playing at home or on the road, I don't think that matters much to anybody at this point. If you're not winning the division, you're in for a tough matchup no matter what. But the reality is, you got to win a playoff game this year. You got to do it. So,
I think you got to win a series.
yeah, really, right? And I'm not just saying maybe not even just a wild card. Like go in and win an ALDS. That's a.
Yeah,
Do you think this lineup can do that as constructed right now?
that was a sigh for anyone wondering. I don't know. I think they're a playoff team. If you can get in, you can win. I mean, I think that's been proven over and over again among various teams throughout the years. But I wouldn't say they're a favorite by any means. I think they're probably the third or fourth best team in the AL East, and they're going to be fighting for a third wild card spot.
It also depends how you kind of enter the playoffs, right? Like we were talking to Ethan and Mitch, and they were talking about how like even though yes, the Jays were making the playoffs, it just didn't feel like they didn't have that sense that they were going to win a World Series. But just they weren't really hot. They didn't kind of enter the playoffs feeling great, and it showed in Minnesota, right? Whereas you look at a team like Arizona, the way they kind of entered the postseason, the way they were hot at the right time, and that's such a huge part of it. And it hearing from those two guys who were around the Jays saying, nah, it didn't really feel like they had much of a chance. It didn't seem like they thought they had much of a chance. I thought was interesting because the old adage has been just get in. But ideally, just get in and also be hot at the right time is a huge part of it as well.
Yeah, so another, I don't want to say key to this lineup, but the interesting piece of this lineup is what do you get from Joey Votto? Does he make this team at all this year? Is Daniel Vogelback the answer? I don't think so. I think Votto provides much more than other bench pieces as far as being able to work in that bat. He's been an on-base machine over the course of his career. I know he's 40 years old, but I think it's an interesting bench piece, and I think he can contribute.
Well, I'll tell you this, there's going to be lots of talk about the bench lefty, more than most teams' bench lefties. I'll tell you that. Yeah, like what a great story. If it works out, right? I could kind of paint a picture either way with these guys, with Vogelback and Votto. I think Vogelback has earned the job out of spring. I think obviously that sort of happened anyways because Votto tripped on a bat or whatever he did and twisted his ankle. So he's going to need to ramp up and he'll need to be at the complex here as April gets going to work up. So I think that worked out well. Vogelbach deserves the chance to start the year. And then maybe once he starts struggling or if he's struggling against righties, maybe Votto's ready to go. And that's sort of a nice transition, right?
I just think Votto provides more than other
Sure.
guys. I think Votto had some power last year. He hit 14 home runs and 200 something at bats.
Yeah.
That veteran presence, whether you buy into that or not, or the older guys in the room or whatever Ken Rosenthal said about this team, the PR doesn't hurt for the
Oh,
team.
yeah.
That's not going to drive on-field decisions necessarily, but that doesn't hurt having Joey Votto around for the fan base and the sound bites and everything like that. And I think he hit. The question is, can he hit 220 and hit 15 home runs off the bench or 10 to 15 home runs, come off the bench late against a righty and provide a good at bat, get himself on, those sort of things to utilize other parts of the roster. That's going to be the key. If you can do that, then that's a very useful left-handed hitter off the bench.
Yeah, they just got to keep him healthy. Keep him healthy. And the eye never leaves you, right? He's got a great eye. His whole career, he's just had a fantastic on base and a fantastic eye. That doesn't go away, right? So, and that doesn't get injured either. You know what I mean? Like that's something that you can rely upon. The power can come and go, but he should be able to still get on base at a decent clip. You're right though. Like what a PR slam dunk, right? An easy PR for the Jays. That seemed just so easy. The fact that he was still out there on the market did scare me a little bit because I was thinking, well, okay, like what do we get? What are you really bringing in here,
What
right?
do others know that we don't? Kind
Exactly,
of.
exactly. Because you could have done this in January. You could have done this in December. Why are you doing it now? Well, because he doesn't neither of you have many options, do you? Right? They're both the Jays kind of needed some good PR, and Votto wants a last chance of the bigs. It works out well. But like you said, the Jays do have a spot on the roster, right? If Vogelbach does struggle, and like you said, they bring different things. Vogelbach more of you're looking at power against righties. That's it. He brings power against righties. So late in the game, when you've got a tough righty on the hill, right? And you can pinch hit for one of your righties. They do bring different things, though, obviously. And to be honest, I'm sure fans kind of want to see Votto more than Vogelbach, obviously, the Canadian, right? But I think we will see that. Like, I think as the season goes on, it could be a thing where Votto pops up. Maybe he doesn't come up till June, right? Maybe he takes a long time to get going. He's in AAA. He's struggling. Vogelbach's playing well. There's no injuries. And it just kind of blends in and we start talking about other things, And then all of a sudden, Vogelbach gets sick or whatever, and oh, Votto's a J. That could happen too, where it's a conversation now, it kind of goes away as everyone does their thing. And then, in the middle of the season, it becomes this wonderful story, right? I am sort of preparing myself for that and how interesting that would be. And Matt, like as a long time, obviously, viewer of Canadian baseball, just for us here, like how cool would it be to see Votto in a Jays jersey at Rogers Center, especially like in a big moment, ninth inning against the Yankees, down one, need a hit, something like that. I mean, you can't write something better than that.
Yeah, and I think you had your hot take on Varsho. This may not be a hot take, but I think Votto's a J by the end of April. If
Wow.
he's healthy. If he's healthy. If he's not healthy, obviously that's not going to
Right.
be the case. But or unless Daniel Vogelback comes out and hits 6 or 7 home runs in April, which I don't. I
No.
just the Vogelback sign just strikes me as throw it against the wall and see if it sticks, and it's
Yeah.
probably not going to.
Hmm.
Um, and again, I just think at first I didn't see the fit for Votto. I really didn't. But the more time goes on, the fewer options I'm seeing here. I think there is a spot for a guy like that. Is he going to hit 270 and pop 30 home runs? No, he's not going to get that much playing time. But can he be a useful piece off the bench? Sure. And this is what this team's now talking about as far as offensively when you go past the top four. It's who can give you what at what time. And I think Votto he still has a little bit left in the tank. I mean, he hit that home run off Zach Wheeler. That was a pretty cool moment. I get it. It's spring training. Wheeler's probably working on stuff, but he still turned around, what was that, 96-mile-an-hour fastball. So it's still there somewhere. And can he give you enough to put him on the roster? I think so. And I think he will be up sooner than later. Health, obviously, being the main driver of that.
It's a very like heartwarming story, obviously. Like it goes without saying. Votto being a J is just like so satisfying. It's so cool. Right? Especially like if you've seen the guy get like I'm too young to have watched kind of Votto's early career, get drafted and the whole deal. I was a little young, but playing in the World Baseball Classic at Rogers Center, right? And all those years as a Red, the MVP, all that. And now finally coming home, it's cool, right? At the very least, even if he's not a J by the end of April, maybe he only comes up and he ends up only playing in like 5 games. It's still really cool. Now, how much does it affect the lineup? Well, maybe not much, right? Again, like we talked about earlier, like you're looking for a handful of big hits, right? You're looking for a nice stretch from these guys, right? Whether it's Vogelbach or Votto or even Davis Schneider, like these bench pieces don't move the needle a ton in the grand scheme of things, but boy, is Votto a great story. And I think that does go for something. For what has been look, it's been a difficult offseason for fans. This is at least something to kind of throw them a bone, you know?
And he's been injured the last few years. He obviously
Yeah.
had that shoulder surgery. He talked about that. But go back and look, and I know he's 40 years old. Okay, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything here, but go back to I'm looking at his 2021 season. So that was only 2.5, 3 years ago. 129 games. He hit 266, 36 home runs, and 99 RBIs. Has he fallen off the map that bad that he can't be a productive bench player at this point? A
Hmm.
guy with that skill level, and I think what gets lost sometimes on maybe younger Jays fans, or just as time goes on, is people forget how good Joey Votto really was. Um, so who knows? It was 100% worth a shot. And again, I'm with you. I was surprised it didn't happen earlier.
Just trying to find here. I believe he's just 26 hits away from being the all-time Canadian hits leader.
If you can
It's
do that
just
as a Jay, that's pretty cool.
exactly right. And imagine if he did it at home, right? And never mind in a meaningful moment or not. Just that itself for Canadian baseball, we are the Canadian Baseball Network. That would matter greatly, I think, for a lot of fans, and that would just be cool because whatever else happens the rest of the year, that's something that you can hold on to and say that was a really cool moment. I have it here. So Votto this is per Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum on Twitter. On March 8th, they tweeted out Votto is only 26 hits, 28 home runs, and 13 doubles away from new Canadian records. Larry Walker is the current leader in all three. So he probably won't get the home runs, probably not the doubles, unless he really has a great season and really gets a lot of playing time. But the hits are very possible. 26 hits, I mean, if he's healthy, I think that's possible, man.
Yeah, I think he does get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, what a cool moment that would be. And it's not the same as winning a playoff series probably for most Jays fans, but it would be a cool moment for the season regardless.
Yeah, and so aside from Votto, though, that is a cool story. Not a lot of other cool stories to really be exactly thrilled about to hang your hat on with this lineup, right? As we were talking about, you really are grasping at straws, right? You need bounce backs. You need a return to form from various players, right? We talked about Springer needing more to kind of bounce back, and uh, I've used the term bounce back many times, but just get back to what he was. And I know he's 35 now, but you need him to still provide some solid production. If he's going to be your leadoff hitter and now he's in a corner, well, he better provide some because he's not providing as much defensive value as he once did. You look at Guerrero Jr. needing to figure out what the hell he is, right? We're gonna find out a lot about what Guerrero Jr. is made of this year, whether he is what he is or if he is that 2021 version. And then you look down the lineup. Can Varsho provide more power? Can Kirk provide more consistency? What can you get from some of these bench options in IKF? But I think, Matt, like when you kind of boil it down, a lot more concerns than stability in this lineup.
Yeah, yeah, I think I expressed my opinion on the concerns in this lineup for sure. But it's a long season, and I caution Blue Jays fans to realize that I know Twitter or X will be on fire after a week if they start 2-5 or whatever the case may be. But it's a long season. Let things play out. Look at no better example of that than Matt Chapman last year. Matt
Yeah.
Chapman looked like an MVP through March and April, and look what happened. So you got to look. That's what's great about baseball is it's the long grind, like you said. That's what we look forward to. That's what we love about it. So just let it play out, and see what happens.
And like I think for a lot of fans, what I've seen online, and kind of maybe how it makes sense to be this way because of last year, is don't have too many expectations. Just go in it and enjoy the baseball. And if they're playing well, great. But if they're not, like, weren't you kind of expecting that? Like because everyone's so negative about the team. If they start out 2-8, what are you going to be shocked, right? Like really? I mean, you might be a little bit, but if they start out 8-2 or if they start out 2-8, personally, I wouldn't be surprised either way. Now, I think that the classic not surprised guy is really condescending and annoying, but I do genuinely believe that. I could see
Yeah.
it really going either way. And I think if your fans just kind of, IKF, maybe IKF gets off to a great start, right? Or maybe he gets off to an awful start. But that's the best part about baseball to me, right? Is you have all these expectations and all these crazy thoughts, and then you just actually get them to watch them play and just
Yeah.
watch the things play out. And that's the best part of baseball coming back. I'm thrilled for it, right? Matt, I know you are too. We here all are at the Canadian Baseball Network. It's great for baseball to be back. And with the Votto story, it's kind of what I was getting at, right? The Votto story, like regardless of what if the Jays do in the playoffs and the wild card, it's big picture, etc. It'd just be cool to see a Canadian have a Canadian record on Canadian soil. And
Yeah.
things like that, I would stress Jays fans to look forward to more this year than last year.
Yeah, just like you said, just enjoy it. I know that's easier said than done, and by week 3 there'll be panic, or we'll be playing a World Series parade, some Blue Jays fans. But yeah, just sit back, enjoy it. There's gonna be a lot of interesting storylines to see what this team does. There's a lot of talent on this team. I guess that kind of leads to our last thing, was the over-under you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
86.5 wins. What do you think?
I'll take the over.
I'll take the over. I think this is a playoff team. I think it's going to come down to the wire, but I think it's a playoff team. From there, I'd make no predictions.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And I think that over 86.5 wins should get them into the playoffs. I mean, it's kind of dicey. Again, we'll see what the number is, whether it's 87 or 88 or 89, but that would put you right there. And I could see them being on the under, especially if there's some injuries and if the pitching staff has some injuries. I could see that being the case, but I'm choosing to be a little more optimistic today, Matt.
Yeah, I'm taking the over. But we'll see. I guess we'll come back 6 months from now and have another conversation on our season in review. But let's just enjoy the next 6 months and everything that comes with it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the Canadian Baseball Network. Just $2 a month or $20 for the year. Can't go wrong there. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out Canadian Baseball Network for extensive and comprehensive coverage of the latest in Canadian baseball. And The Baseball Zone, Canada's leading instructional baseball academy and training home to thousands of MLB pro, college, and youth baseball players.